Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you're in today, and welcome to this latest webinar in our series on the energy transition, organized by the Franco-Indian Chamber of Commerce in Paris. We are talking about the energy transition, and the energy transition began several years back with the impetus on renewables. So when you have solar and wind and geothermal and other technologies that have sharply reduced in costs and set off the energy transition. After that came the turn of batteries, and these batteries have been applied in both stationary settings as well as in mobility. And now is the turn of hydrogen, and especially green hydrogen from electrolysis. So now there's a lot of hype being built in green hydrogen. And our job over here, our task for this webinar, is to distill the reality from the hype. The subject of this webinar is green hydrogen in India, building a new industry. So it's not just about the technologies themselves, it's all about what is needed to establish the commercial models and to create operations on the ground. So the full value chain of operations from an Indian perspective. And to see this through, we have a stellar panel join us. I'll just take the names of the panelists in the order that they will speak today. We have got Pierre Laboué, who is the head of international relations for France Hydrogen, which brings together about 450 members of the French hydrogen sector, many of whom have plans for India. We have Amrit Singh Dev, who is the senior managing director of FTI Consulting in India and heads the secretariat of the India Hydrogen Alliance, the IH2A. The IH2A is an industry body that is promoting the commercial development of the clean hydrogen sector in India. We have Jaideep Malik, who is the general manager for John Cockerill's green hydrogen business in India. So John Cockerill, as you would know, is the world's largest manufacturer of alkaline electrolyzers, and they have recently set up a JV with Greenco to build 2 electrolyzer gigafactories in India. Along with Jaideep, we have Ariane Jou-Villard. Ariane is the Chief Business Development Officer of HDF Energy in India. And HDF offers innovative and flexible solutions, developing projects centering on green hydrogen and a unique multi-megawatt fuel cell. We have Prabhat Mishra joining us, who is the Chief Business Development Officer for Renew, so formerly called as Renew Power in the green hydrogen domain. So he begins, beginning with its renewables business, Renew is now expanding its scale and its ambition to become a complete provider of decarbonization solutions. And last but not least in the value chain, we have Laurence Boisramé, who is the Hydrogen Global Sales Director for Bureau Veritas. So Bureau Veritas provide a full range of certification services to ensure that hydrogen is safe, sustainable, economically viable, and reliable. So it's about building trust in the industry so that we escape this whole issue of booms and busts. And we want to make sure that we can have a stable growth of this sector, both in the country and globally. So with that, I welcome my panelists. My name is Amit Pathare. I'm the founder and CEO of Fine Partners. Now, along with the panelists, we have, of course, our esteemed audience. And having introduced my panelists, I would not like to ignore them. So I have one request for you while we get started. If each member of the audience can just use the chat feature and note down their names, what work you do, and which country you're in. So I'll allow you to get as creative as you wish, your name, your work, and which country you're in. Then that would be great. It'll give us a better sense of who's there. Everyone in the audience, I would please request keep your video feeds off and also keep yourself on mute. And with that, let me pass the baton to our first speaker, Pierre Laboué of France Hydrogen. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And so in 5 minutes, I will first lay the ground for to give you an overview of hydrogen, and so for the other speakers to be able to also intervene and present themselves in a context. So as you might know, around 50 countries have adopted hydrogen strategies worldwide. France and India are among them. France adopted its national hydrogen strategy in 2020 and India in 2023. Both countries have announced ambitious public financing support. So you have $10 billion for France, around $2.4 billion for India in nominal exchange rates. So, well, why are France and India betting so much on hydrogen? France and India's national hydrogen strategy share a bit the same goals. It is to decarbonize the economy and so achieving net zero by 2070 for India, 2050 for France, reduce the dependence on imported hydrocarbons and so fossil fuels, assume technology leaderships in a new market and a new promising market, and support economic and industrial growth and job creation. A key difference is that India is also willing to become an exporter of hydrogen, whereas France is more focused on satisfying its own demand. But so, before going further, what is hydrogen, and more precisely, what is green hydrogen? Well, hydrogen, and more precisely also dihydrogen, is a gas combining two hydrogen atoms. And so in some places, dihydrogen can be found in the nature and extracted from the ground, but this is still an exception. Current dihydrogen production is based on extracting hydrogen atoms from other molecules. You have different methods, which are referred to using colors: green, gray, blue, yellow, white, pink, brown, black, turquoise, you name it. Basically, at the end, it's the same molecules of dihydrogen, but it's the way those molecules have been generated, and so their environmental value are completely different. And so certifying the way hydrogen is produced is critical, and this is where companies like Bureau Veritas are very important. So in 2021, 99% of hydrogen production was based on fossil fuels. This is what is called gray hydrogen or black or brown, depends. This production emits a lot of CO2, and we don't want that. So another method is to extract hydrogen atoms from water molecules, so H2O, which is composed of 2 atoms of hydrogen and 1 atom of oxygen. And the process used here is called electrolysis, meaning you split a molecule of water, H2O, using electricity from renewable sources, wind or solar, and release the oxygen and keep the hydrogen. Hydrogen produced from water and renewable power is called green hydrogen. And the key technology here is the electrolyzer. And so this is where John Cockrell, for instance, comes in to produce electrolyzers. So renewable hydrogen production is expected to rise fast. Current production in 2021 was really marginal, but if we want to reach the International Energy Agency net zero scenario, by 2030, we will need to step up global renewable hydrogen production from almost 0 today to 90 million tons by 2030. And this is where the action of Renew Power, for instance, and also HDF Energy and other companies is fundamental to launch hydrogen production projects globally and in India. And well, last question, how can this green hydrogen can help reach France and India's objective? Well, the use of hydrogen contributes to the decarbonization of 3 main sectors: the industry, mobility, and the energy sector. So the hydrogen can be used either as a feedstock or as a fuel. This is really important. And as a feedstock, hydrogen is used as a raw material, an input to produce another product. And as a fuel, hydrogen is used to store, to transport, and to deliver energy. The use of hydrogen as a feedstock is really critical. According to the International Energy Agency, so global hydrogen demand reached more than 94 million tons in 2021. And this is a demand almost exclusively for hydrogen as a feedstock, produced from gray hydrogen, so from fossil fuels. So key challenge is to green this feedstock in order to produce, for instance, green ammonia for fertilizer or green steel through a process called the direct reduction of iron. So also, hydrogen is a very versatile energy carrier, and new uses of hydrogen as a fuel could emerge fast when direct electrification is difficult to achieve. In the mobility sector, hydrogen is a solution to address the decarbonization of heavy mobility, either requiring high engine power, long autonomy to travel long distances, and/or fast refueling. It can be road vehicles, trains, ships, planes. And in the energy sector, green hydrogen can be particularly useful for meeting energy requirements of remote geographies, including, for instance, islands. And so in conclusion, making this hydrogen economy a reality by 2030 is really a challenge, and it requires international cooperation to reach this common goal, fighting climate change. France and India adopted the Indo-French roadmap on the development of green hydrogen in October 2022 to work together on common challenges. And so I'm glad today to be part of this conference organized by this Indio-French Chamber of Commerce to bring together Indian and French stakeholders to in this hydrogen journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pierre. That was an excellent introduction with a lot of information there. And I'm glad you made the distinction between hydrogen as a feedstock and hydrogen as a fuel. I think that is a very critical distinction, given its contribution to Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions. So thank you very much. Pass the baton to Amrit Singh Dev of FTI Consulting and the India Hydrogen Alliance. Amrit?
Thanks, Amit. And thank you for inviting me and all the participants who have logged in. The perspective that I can share is probably from the Indian project development side and what we are doing as industry together with the government and some of the discussions with the funding agencies and the state governments. So before I do that, quick introduction. The India Hydrogen Alliance is essentially a grouping of Indian and global companies focused on commercializing hydrogen and hydrogen projects in India in partnership with the government where appropriate. And we are working with the central government as well as the state governments on looking at hydrogen commercialization at scale. So the last part is important, and it's an important distinction to be made because hydrogen has been talked about for a while, right? And this, I just want to remind all the participants, this is the second national hydrogen policy. The first one was framed more than 15 years back, and many of the targets were missed. Well, all the targets were missed because probably it was premature and maybe it was too focused on the transport use case only. What's different this time is there is a focus on industrial offtake and to look at the hydrogen economy as a full value chain from a full value chain perspective. That's what we are doing. Our members are, Reliance, JSW Group, BP, Chart Industries, Suzlon, Hero Future Energies, just to give you a sense of sort of the mix of actors, Sumitomo, and also now the funding agencies. Other than the banks, the European Investment Bank is a partner organization. So what we are trying to do is to bring all the value chain players together to focus on what should be large-scale project development and deployments, right? Now, you will hear a lot in the marketplace about different scales of projects. I think there's
non-speakers. Please mute your audios. Thank you.
So just to give you a sense of what are the messages coming from India on the project development side, we have certain small scale pilots being undertaken by a few players. Many of them are there are also large players. Yeah, sorry, I was unmuted by the moderator, but I'm back on, hopefully. And then there are very large export-oriented plans that have been announced by some players who are willing to take that risk to put billions of dollars to projects, which is fantastic. But obviously, as IH2A, our house view is this is very early stage and at a nascent level of development. So you have to work together. Public-private partnerships are key to look at sort of mid-sized projects because this is still a learning experience. And yes, they will be done in a sort of hub or a hydrogen valley structure where you co-locate production and consumption and include storage and transportation as an evacuation within the same hub, right? And if you can make that economics work and bankable, then you have a scaling up opportunity before you move to gigawatt scale. So you see different approaches being done by different players. I can talk more about the Kochi project we are helping support as IH2A with the Kerala government on that. So I'll stop there to give you a sense. I mean, so this is the progress that has been happening in the last few months. So government support on offtake is extremely important from the price side, and we are building the case for that. Obviously, not for all hydrogen projects, but maybe probably for large-scale hubs of a certain size. A lot of this is still being worked out, right? The National Green Hydrogen Mission was announced, but there are decisions on offtake and sectoral offtake also, which are still not decided. So let me stop there because we can get deeper and deeper into this.
Great, thanks very much, Amrit. That was very enlightening. And now let me pass it to, I believe you have Jaideep next, right? Jaideep from John Cockerell.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks, Amit, for organizing this interesting session and providing opportunity, inviting me here to present the John Cockerell. So as Pere explained, different shades of hydrogen and different applications, and Amrit Singh Dev informed that how Indian Hydrogen Alliances involved and helping government to draft the policy, to prepare the policies so that we achieve the goal. And the goal is the net zero carbon emission, which is announced by Government of India. The target is 2070. And for this, I will just explain how John Cockerell is involved in this. So as we talk about green hydrogen, we talk about the electrolyzer. So this is where John Cockerell comes into. We are the largest manufacturer of electrolyzer. John Cockerell is more than 200-year-old company. We have expertise in manufacturing, and we presently have more than 1 gigawatt of manufacturing facility globally available. We recently announced a JV with Greenco to set up 2 gigawatt factories in India. And why we chose India is there is a LCOH when we talk about hydrogen, the levelized cost of hydrogen. It has to be very economical. If LCOH of hydrogen is not viable, then it doesn't serve the purpose of different applications. India, having the favorable geographical conditions, we have good source of renewable energy, solar, wind, pump storage is there. The cost of renewable energy, that is the actual cost to produce green hydrogen, is the minimum in the world. I would say is the least in India. And so that is one of the reasons we chose India, that we foresee there is a huge demand in India. The production of hydrogen in India is going to be very economical rate. There are off-takers, oil and gas refineries, which are the largest off-takers. They are completely depend on the gray hydrogen. There is the steel sector, which is moving towards decarbonization, and that can be larger than oil refineries if they completely go to decarbonize in different sectors. Other than this, there is a mobility. Long-term heavy industry mobility is one sector where we can see there is a good scope, good demand, and hydrogen can be economical solutions. So the reason why John Cockerell chose India is the geographical favorable conditions, the market demand, and as recently India surpassed China to be the first country in population. So we have 65-70% of youth. So there is so much talent in India, which is very creative, which is going to help to achieve this net zero target globally to help a better environment. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jaideep. That was an excellent overview of John Cockerell's ambitions for India and the overall context of you also spoke a little bit about the market segments that you seem to be targeting. So that's great. Thank you. Let me pass the baton to Ariane of HDF Energy, please.
Yes, hi. Hello, everyone. So thank you for having me in this webinar today. And so building off what my fellow panelists have said, today I'll be speaking to you a little bit more about HDF Energy's experience as a leading company in the development of fully decarbonized and dispatchable green hydrogen-based power solutions. So we are an independent power producer that was founded 10 years ago in Bordeaux, France. And today we believe that our technology is a game changer in the energy industry and has the potential to revolutionize the way that we produce round the clock energy. Not a decade from now, not 5 years from now, but today. So undeniably, the Indian energy sector is one of the most significant contributors to our greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's via the main grid, microgrids, captive power in industrial sectors, etc., because we're still largely dependent on fossil fuels. Now, HDF has believed for some time that green hydrogen is the answer, because it's produced through zero emission electrolysis using renewable energies. So the hydrogen can be stored and used as a fuel for a wide range of applications, from transportation to electricity generation, anything you can imagine. So HDF offers two green hydrogen-based models that are both fully decarbonized and currently dispatchable. So our Renew stable plants combine a green hydrogen production site with innovative energy storage solutions and a unique multi-megawatt fuel cell to provide a stable, reliable energy that can be called upon at any time, much like traditional power plants. On the other hand, our high power plants function as a fuel cell park of sorts, where hydrogen is provided by a third party and power is generated around the clock for the off-taker. So our savoir-faire and our fuel cell, which is made by us with Ballard technology, allows us to really efficiently kind of store and distribute this clean energy, especially during times of low renewable energy production. So what we do is we provide clean and reliable energy to communities and industries around the world, including now 7 countries in Asia, having entered the Indian market little late last year. So our solutions are obviously scalable and adaptable, allowing us to meet both small and large energy demands. And we're currently pursuing partnerships with local stakeholders, notably power generation and distribution companies, who want to bring applications in the hydrogen to energy sector to India before 2030. So just to give you a bit of a practical example, so located in French Guiana, our project Renew Stable CEOG features the world's largest green hydrogen energy storage system. It supplies power to the 300 megawatt national grid and will be commissioned by 2024. We've signed a 25-year PPA with EDF and are committed to delivering 10 megawatts a day and 3 megawatts a night to the grid, with a total of 500 gigawatt hours and 600 tons of hydrogen produced per year. So according to our most conservative estimations, basically without counting state subsidies, we're still able to arrive at an LCOE between $1 and $3 per unit. But with an annual capacity utilization factor of more than 80% and a carbon emission rate of 0, it still remains a very competitive alternative to existing firm renewable energy solutions in India. And this is currently. So, imagine, notably with project scalability, how low the prices will continue to drop over the next few years, thanks to, supportive policy, development of a local supply chain, etc. And now, thanks to the signing of an MOU between HDF and Indonesia's state-owned PTPLN last week, so we'll be developing around 20 similar projects across Indonesia, thanks to our unique island grid model. And we also have high power plants that are in operation around the world, helping to decarbonize petrochemical plants that are ready to take that step today. So just in conclusion, today, is green hydrogen the most expensive source of firm, reliable, and sustainable clean energy? In a word, yes. But someone must bear this cost, and they must start now, because let me tell you what else is expensive: bearing the cost of climate disaster after climate disaster, of hundreds of communities progressively displaced, and of watching our home planet burn around us. Um, I do believe that I'm the youngest member of this panel, and this year I turned 25, and I hope that I can live to see this world attain its net zero goals in my lifetime. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ariane. That was a very eloquent presentation. Frankly, I'll be honest that before I met HDF Energy, I saw that the application of green hydrogen for as a fuel for power generation is a few years away. So it's very interesting to see a company that is actually transacting in this problem statement of how to provide a dispatchable power source that is completely decarbonized and which is not from using hydrogen as a fuel. So that's very interesting. Thank you very much. Let me bring in now Prabhat Mishra of Renew. Prabhat, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Amit, and good morning and good afternoon to everyone. And thanks again, Amit, for organizing this. I think we need lots and lots of it, because in the whole segment of hydrogen, one, we need to understand it more, and we need to also create an awareness. And I completely agree to the point Adian made at the end, that the cost of hydrogen it seems to be high, and which is practically the fact of life today. But it's important to bring it down. And for bringing it down, I'm sure we need to scale it up, just like we did renewables. Renewables were almost a similar stage if you look at 2 decades ago, particularly solar, and see where it is now. It all happened because there was a big thrust movement to scale up. And for anything to really become economical, it has to scale up. And in the beginning, until the scale up happens, it needs push support. We see a lot of action all around, and a lot of talks, a lot of intent. But I think more needs to be done on ground, and we need to really tackle these challenges more smartly, because there are competing economical uses, there are competing technologies, competing usage of renewable energy. And I can tell you from our experience, and we are the largest renewable energy company in India, having more than 14 gigawatts of solar, wind, and hydro assets, which we have created in last 10 years. And I would say that has been the fastest scale up and probably in the world of organic capacity addition. But it is not easy. Setting things on ground, it's not easy. And now we are talking about, in fact, if you convert the requirement of green hydrogen into renewable energy capacity, which is needed globally to really make a difference, I think it's going to be more than 800 gigawatts in next 2.5 decades. Now, that's not easy. And we have seen even crossing the 100 gigawatt capacity addition globally in renewable has taken so long. And from there, if you're looking at multiplying this capacity addition over next 10 years, it is possible. And thankfully, there are enough resource-rich places we have all around globally. All it needs to make it happen. And I think it's the will and right actions in a timely manner is all it needs. And we have seen, at least recently, all of us know that in US, they have come up with a fantastic policy, which at least promises to help a lot in terms of reducing the production cost. And same is expected, and we hope it is going to come in different countries and different subcontinents, including in India. Now, Amrit talked about green hydrogen mission, and if you look at India across different production hubs, across different geographies from green hydrogen standpoint, I see India is very well placed to be a production hub. And why do I say that? Is we need practically three fundamental things to make it happen. One, we need to have a very, very competitive RE resource and low-cost RE possible in any geography, which is today, at least in India, we all have seen. The scaling is the second requirement. So we need to be low cost, but at the same time, we also should be able to do it at scale. And that is also something which is possible in India. And the resources in terms of even manpower, which is what Jaideep, I think, briefly touched upon, that the ability to put things on ground, that requires huge amount of resources, including human resource. And that is something which is one other advantage we have, because we see different geographies struggling for different reasons, Australia, US, and everywhere else. Putting things on ground, including Europe, it's not going to be easy, and it will require humongous amount of resources, including human resources. The other important part, which makes India very, very competitive in the overall production scheme of things, is the large grid, and which is not there practically in most of the other geographies, including Australia, Middle East, and US also has a different format of grid structure, which doesn't allow this kind of integration. India, being a one large integrated grid, provides unique opportunity to really create innovative solutions of supplying renewable energy at the kind of profile we need. And at Renew, we have been pioneers in creating those innovative solutions, whether it is round the clock kind of power, or evening peak or morning peak requirements of power, or any kind, by integrating beautifully the different kind of sources, wind, solar, hydro, intelligently using storage, as well as leveraging the markets, which is another big feature in India, what we have, which allows a generator having capability across different sources and integrating them well, using the digital and AI capabilities, which also we have developed over the last few years. It makes very interesting proposition. And from the work what we have done, at least we believe that even at current level of subsidies or support which the government providing in India, I think it's one of the most competitive across different geographies, except probably US, where the subsidies, the extent of subsidy is pretty high, and we'll have to figure how does India remain as competitive as US in time to come. And before I complete, the other most important element, which is missing right now and more needs to be done, including in India and across different geographies, is the demand. The signals, concrete signals for demand. Right now, it's more intent and interest, but until unless we create demand signals, it is very difficult for an individual organization, users, and of hydrogen or its derivatives, whether it is green ammonia, green methanol, or sustainable aviation fuel, to really start paying for it. Because until it becomes an industry standard, no one company would actually jeopardize their economic interest in near term for the larger benefits of the world. And therefore, governments have to play a very important role in creating those demand signals, maybe starting small. And that's perfectly fine, because even scaling up of hydrogen production will also take its own time. And therefore, starting concretely and giving a very clear intent of how the long-term demand is going to shape up will help the entire ecosystem, including the electrolyzer manufacturer to scale up, including the RE capacity to really ramp up beyond the green electricity requirement. I think all of that has to happen. Fortunately, it is happening. At least directionally, it is looking very bright and positive. We have to keep at it, and maybe more discussions like this will help create that push and thrust. And maybe very soon we will start seeing those kind of signals coming on ground. And we are there to really support scale up production as the market needs. We are taking those steps. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Prabhat. That was an excellent intervention, and I heard some new points over there. So India's grid advantage and the issue of the demand signals that we need to see, all of these are very pertinent points. We are losing time, but I don't want to deny the opportunity to our last speaker, Laurence. Laurence, I'll pass you the baton, please.
Thank you, Amit. I'm very glad and thank you to have me in this webinar. So I'm Laurence Boramé from Bureau Veritas. Maybe a short introduction of who is Bureau Veritas. Bureau Veritas is a global leader in the testing, inspection, and certification services. We are a French headquartered group that has been created almost 200 years ago, employing more than 80,000 people in 140 countries. And in India, we employ around 5,000 people. Our overall role is to shape trust. And it's the same for hydrogen, where our role is really to bring the transparency that is needed for shaping this trust. And we can act in two different positions. We are very well known as a third independent party, but we can also act as a technical expert, providing technical insight in your project. So coming back to the question of where we stand with hydrogen, all the speakers, all the panelists have brought a very complete view on the topic, on the sector of the industry. The main, of course, point is that hydrogen is seen as an energy vector able to decarbonize the entire energy system through storage and transport of renewable power, of course, but also as a mean to decarbonize energy uses. And what will be at stake is really environmental and sustainability attributes of this hydrogen. We know that hydrogen is not new, but what is new is the way we produce it. And it is what will really matter and for which we need to bring more information and transparency. Where we look where we are today, where the industry is today, we can say that we are still in this early stage of project development stage. And according to the last report from the International Energy Agency, we can see that only 4% of low carbon hydrogen production projects announced have reached FID or financial investment decision or are under construction. So it's a very, very small part of the market that is already in this, I would say, maturity level. And why this? Probably because of, I would say, several reasons, but one of the key reasons is the lack of visibility and the lack of trust that is due to the lack of standard. There is no global common definition of what is green or even low carbon hydrogen today. Reaching a consensus at global level will take time, especially if we want to go through ISO, for instance, standards. It will take years, maybe a decade, I don't know. So it is really a drawback that we can see today in the industry. And in this early phase of the market, developers need to prove bankability of their project. And at the same time, investors and financiers are seeking assurance in selecting the right project to invest in. So there is always this, I would say, chicken and egg, who can bring this necessary transparency. So this is, I would say, why as Bureau Veritas, we are feeling a global need for providing guidelines, and these guidelines serving as reference to compare different hydrogen production options, especially to foster international trade agreements. And that's why we have developed, so our motto as Bureau Veritas is really shaping a world of trust. And this is where we can bring the needed transparency, and why we have developed a certification scheme for renewable hydrogen through a global methodology. I said at the beginning that we are present in 140 countries, and it is why we can see the topic from everywhere, I would say. And this is why also we can develop this methodology that has the same value and that will apply exactly the same wherever the production of hydrogen is. Our scheme considers not only origin of energy or not only carbon intensity. We consider 3 pillars that for us are at the same level of importance. As said by Amit in the introduction, these 3 pillars are safety, sustainability, and renewable input, meaning that if we really want hydrogen to play this important role in the decarbonization of the energy system, we need to ensure that it is produced and handled in a safe manner. So the safety is for us of paramount importance. Second is the sustainability pillar. What it means, the sustainability pillar? It means that we need to ensure that production of hydrogen will have no harm to the environment or to the human being now and in the future. So we need to look at impacts on the overall impact on the environment, not only the question of carbon intensity again. So for this, we apply what we call a life cycle assessment methodology, looking at different aspects. And we look also at, for instance, the water footprint. We know that for producing hydrogen, especially through electrolysis, we need water and a lot of water. So this is also something that is important. And of course, the last point is the renewable input to check that, of course, hydrogen through electrolysis is produced with energy sources, renewable energy sources. In the case the hydrogen is subsequently converted to ammonia, and we know that it will be the case in India for local use of ammonia for production of fertilizers, but also for export. So in the case hydrogen is subsequently converted to ammonia, we have also developed a certification scheme for this part, for ammonia, with the same 3 set of criteria: safety, sustainability, and renewable input. And for getting this renewable ammonia certification and label, all energy input needed in the production process must come from renewable sources. I don't want to be too long, but I think as a conclusion, in this early period, we really feel that this was a missing part, the missing piece to enable investment and development of the production capacities and forthcoming trade agreements. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Laurence, and thank you collectively to all the panelists for doing a very good job in adhering more or less to the time schedule. We have a few minutes over what we had expected, but we are kind of pretty much there. We still have a bit over 15 minutes for Q&A, and I see that several questions have already been asked by the audience, and I think we have also done a pretty good job of answering as much as we can via the chat as well. So please, I encourage all the panelists to answer as many questions as possible via the chat. And please, I request the audience to have even more questions coming, because if I see something that is in fact even more pertinent than the questions in my list, I will not hesitate to ask them and to give them priority. So while we await more questions, the question, maybe I can just start with an open-ended question to everyone. And this is an open question to all the panelists, that in your experience, what do you see as the most urgent or the most critical priority to build this industry in India? So what's you have talked about what's going well, and you have also spoken about some of the constraints in the sector right now in building a supply chain. You mentioned, for instance, the importance of governmental incentives, the demand creation. Is there something else that you're waiting for? You can even answer this question from a technological perspective. So looking at new hydrogen technologies, you can answer from a scalability perspective. So really, it's up to you. I'll just open the floor to who wants to take this.
Yeah, Amit, shall I go?
Yeah.
Shall I move? Yeah.
Sure,
Okay.
please.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for the question, Amit. So, as I said, we are the largest electrolyzer manufacturer. We manufacture the alkaline electrolyzer. That is the single stack itself is a 5 megawatt. That is 1,000 watt meter cube per hour. It is a huge stack. And we have more than 50 such references. We have 1,000 plus overall expense references, 30 plus years of experience in this electrolyzer industry.
Hmm.
And when we are talking about the challenges which we foresee in India, which we expect in India, other than demand. So we announced the JV. We started the work to build a gigawatt scale factory. It itself is a huge investment. Other than local skills, manpower, which we would train, and other than the demand side, there is another critical thing, which is availability of supply chain. Local supply chain, because as far until and unless it has a local value addition, it is not completely indigenized in few years. It will not reach the best LCOH, not only for domestic consumption, but we foresee that the hydrogen itself or derivatives of hydrogen, green ammonia, green steel, has a very good scope for export. So local value addition, supply chain management, the government policies, government's incentives to attract the complete supply chain in India should be something which will encourage, which will speed up this overall process. And although you said it, but demand is definitely, that is one main key for this entire sector.
Great. Thanks very much, Jaideep. I have a second question from the audience on the transportation. So we don't have a representative from the transportation side of the industry yet on this panel. So that's one gap. But we can think of transportation either in the context of pipelines for longer distances within the same continent, or maritime transport for intercontinental, especially when we are talking of the export markets. Along with that, of course, there's the other, for shorter distances, you've got trucking solutions. And the best transportation solution is indeed where you don't need transportation at all, which means that you actually locate your hydrogen supply near the demand itself. So any takers on what would be the right strategies? So any thoughts on this from our panelists? What would be the key gaps in transportation in India, and where should the emphasis be? Should it be for domestic consumption, and therefore what strategy should we use in terms of location, or should it be more for the export markets? So where do you see the interest and the actual demand from this sector? Who can take this question? Yes, Amrit, please go on.
Yeah, so a couple of points, because there were multiple questions in there. One is reminder about the first hydrogen policy. It was entirely on transport use case, right? And if we repeat the same mistake, it'll be an expensive and time-consuming mistake to make second time over, right? So that's something to keep in mind. And then the reason is simple. The reason is the offtake volumes from transport are unlikely to be high in the beginning, right? And the infrastructure required for refueling infrastructure, converting into liquid hydrogen storage, moving it around, adds multiple sort of cost levels up. So both on cost as well as offtake, the numbers don't match, right? For large scale commercialization. So you have to balance maybe some transport, and you might add that in the mix with offtake on the industrial side. Now, industrial offtake is going to be the key to commercialize, at least in the next 7 years, right? Now, when we talk to all the funding agencies, the project developers, etc., offtake can happen obviously domestically and exports. If you're able to secure offtake, that is going to be key. We were with a project developer and a funding agency. yesterday as part of a World Bank group. And the question was, even for offtake from Australia to Japan, how many real offtake contracts have been signed? So my point is, these are economies where a lot of work has been done on exports. So I think the numbers still have to be worked out, right? And the funding agencies are saying, first get industrial offtake started, domestic industrial offtake started. Of course, exports can come in, and it's a matter of economics, right? If you can add transportation, various forms, to convert and move it around to whether Europe, Japan, great. But it's going to be fundamentally about economics. Yeah.
Great, thanks very much, Amrit. Amrit, I also know that you will be forced to leave maybe before our time ends. So in case I don't get the opportunity later, thank you very much. Please feel free to sign off at the right moment when you need to leave. Let me go to the thanks. Let me go to the next question, also from the audience on storage. So here. So along with transport, the other constraint is the cost of storage, and that also depends on the kinds of solutions that you see. So either you liquefy the hydrogen, but that takes even more energy to liquefy, and therefore that increases the cost of storage. You can compress the hydrogen in cylinders, or you can store it in more natural terrain, like in salt caverns or others. But of course, there we are limited by geography. So if you factor in the cost of storage in the use of hydrogen, so if you look at the overall levelized cost of hydrogen at the point of usage, that has to incorporate not only the cost of production, but also the cost of transport and the cost of storage. Do my panelists have any view on how we can optimize the storage component in the usage of hydrogen?
Amit, if I may, on this question. So HDF Energy, since we're project developers, we've been faced with this issue of storage from the very beginning in the development of our projects, and a discrepancy that I've kind of noticed between how we've done things abroad and how the regulations limit the development of innovative storage solutions in India a little bit, because from what I've personally understood, there are limits in the Indian laws on the Indian market on, for example, the stacking of hydrogen gas storage cylinders. So that, for example, is a challenge, to be faced, because as a result, for use cases and for actually building hydrogen power plants, it suddenly requires that much more space, and the stacking of these cylinders would allow for savings when it comes to especially geographical space. And so I think if there could be, as we go forward into the future, international safety standards surrounding hydrogen, as well as standards surrounding the color coding of hydrogen, as some fellow panelists mentioned. So I think we need, a universalized global policy on hydrogen, and not different policies regarding safety, regarding compression, regarding usage, etc., in different countries. I think we need to, cooperate on a global level when it comes to that.
Great. Thanks, Ariane. Laurence, you wanted to add something to that?
Yeah, I fully agree with what Ariane just said. But coming back to the question of the storage and transportation and the full, I would say, supply chain, not of component, but of the hydrogen or derivatives. Yes, we need to look at the overall economic value of that. But at the same time, we also need to look at the overall impact of these chains. And of course, the question of the overall carbon intensity of the chain and other type of impacts need to be looked at very carefully before probably building these big supply chains. So this is to be considered at the time where we think of it, not when it will be in place, but before.
Great. Thank you very much, Laurence. I seem to be getting a lot more interesting questions from the audience than my own list. It's looking quite dull. So let me just go to another question from the audience. So what's the maturity of technologies with respect to use cases of hydrogen? So here, if you're talking of let's say hydrogen usage in the industry, I think the question is interesting, but here maybe I'll allow the panelists to interpret the question. Is it from the perspective of usage in industry versus in mobility, or power generation, or is it from the perspective of the supply technologies? So different kinds of electrolyzers, or maybe the feed from biomass, or steam methane reformation coupled with carbon capture. So I'll allow my panelists the freedom to interpret that. Prabhat, I'll let you have first dibs on this. Go on.
Thanks, Amit, and taking a clue from what the freedom you have allowed, I'm interpreting one segment of it, and maybe others can pitch in for different dimensions. Hydrogen can be, of course, used directly for multiple and variety of use cases, but equally interesting and is the derivatives of hydrogen. Now, when we convert it into the form of ammonia, or we convert it into form of green methanol or SAF, I think all of them have a very ready use cases, and which is as on date can be scaled up. There are enough use cases, especially industrial kind, and even in the transport segment, we see green methanol is something which, if somebody wants, can, and it is being used already in ships and marine fuel. Green ammonia, probably a couple of years away from now, but that's going to be another big use case coming up as marine fuel. So hydrogen, when we convert it into different derivatives of it, has already a great business case, except a differential on price, which is not huge. And once we are able to support that gap in the near term, I think that's going to help scale up pretty fast.
Lovely, thanks. Does anyone have anything to add to this? I think yes,
Yeah,
Jaideep, go on.
so I fully agree with what Prabhat said. So and I, as if I understand well, so the question is about the maturity of technology. And so there are two things. One, we are already using hydrogen in most of the cases. We are just replacing the method of generating hydrogen. Earlier it was gray hydrogen, blue hydrogen. Now we are trying to change it to green hydrogen. So the technology to produce that hydrogen is fully mature. The electrolyzer is a decades old technology. It is proven in all kind of applications, from small to larger scale. So the maturity of technology is available. The second thing which can be new applications for hydrogen is the derivatives or for transportation, for mobility. So those activities are already tested and matured enough to start at commercial level. And if I would not name it, but yesterday one of the steel producer in India, they injected hydrogen in the blast furnace, 40% of hydrogen. So that is the major achievement. And I will say that it starts from testing at small level, but any application which is going on larger scale is commercially proven only after maturity of the technology. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks
very much, Jaideep. Maybe I can add one point to this, that we see a whole bunch of use cases being talked about in this sector. And in fact, some of them obviously are just make obvious sense, like using hydrogen as a feedstock for industry. In other cases, like using hydrogen for dispatchable power, so there Ariane has talked about specific cases where that becomes really interesting. Or there may be cases where hydrogen as a fuel for mobility makes sense, like in heavy duty trucking, or maybe even in some kinds of remote rail applications. There it makes sense. But when people talk of hydrogen being used, let's say, green hydrogen being combined with CO2 to create e-fuels that can then replace petrol or diesel. I think that's where it starts to test the limits of credibility, because what you're talking about here is, well, you start by using renewables to create green hydrogen. You then combine the green hydrogen with CO2 that is extracted from the air, so that's an extra cost. You combine them to create an e-fuel, which is at best carbon neutral, and then you use that to replace diesel or petrol in engines. And that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever from an economic perspective, as well as from a sustainability perspective, because you are looking at huge amounts of capex in each element of this chain. And instead of that, the question is, well, why wouldn't it be better for you to just use electric vehicles, to use batteries? Wouldn't that allow you to simplify the value chain? So there's very specific cases where it just makes sense to use hydrogen, but we need to be very, very careful about where they are without giving in to a hype about green hydrogen or blue hydrogen or any other forms of sustainable or low carbon or zero carbon hydrogen that we see in the world. I think we are nearing the ends of our time limit, so maybe I'll pause over there and I will give one final word to each of our panelists and allow them to close the session. So starting, well, I will start this time from the back. So from Laurence, maybe I can start with you this time and then make my way backwards to the rest of you. Go.
Yes, I had a final comment on this question of maturity of technologies. What needs to be considered too is that we will need a lot of new equipment, being electrolyzers, fuel cells, pressure vessels, valves, a lot of new equipment. Some are existing ones like valves that will need to be ready for using hydrogen. Others are really dedicated to hydrogen, for which we need also a development type approval, and testing of this equipment will be necessary. So this is something that needs to be anticipated, and especially with a specific testing capacity that need to exist so that the market develop as we want it develops. Final word as a conclusion is, as said, all this needs to be developed with assurance that it will really be a progress for the society, and that's why we need to provide the necessary assurance that it's made with I would say, right standards in terms of, again, safety, sustainability, and overall quality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurence. Prabhat?
Yeah, thanks, Amit. I think we covered a lot of things. So in addition, or at the cost of repetition, I'll only say that we need to not underestimate the scaling up challenge. I think right now we are struggling in the first step to meet the economics. Now that's to me, it's a easier challenge than really scaling up on the ground. And therefore, sooner we get to the second stage, which is where the entire ecosystem has to come in place, and on-ground deployment of assets and production to start. I think that's a much bigger challenge to win. And therefore, sooner we get into that lap by completing the first lap, which is the challenge to meet the economics, either by creating demand or by giving enough incentives to make it compete with the alternate choices. That's the first leg. And I think we are running late in the first leg. We are a little slow. And until we complete the first, it will be difficult to move on to second and encounter the real challenges of scaling up. So that's what I hope everybody, decision makers globally will I'm sure they're looking at it. So they act on it.
Thanks very much, Prabhat. Ariane?
Yes, so just in conclusion, I would like to say that from the perspective of HDF Energy and our decade-long experience already developing hydrogen projects around the world, there's no better experience than practical experience. And we are very enthusiastic about bringing this practical experience to India. with pilot projects. And then, as Prabhat said, tackling the various challenges of scalability. And hopefully, we can contribute as well to the development of an Indian multi-megawatt fuel cell in the medium to long term that would be manufactured right here, which would help immensely in lowering costs for hydrogen use in the energy sector. So yes, thank you for having us today.
Thank you very much, Aryan. Jaideep?
Yeah, so just to conclude, I would say that the target from government of India for a carbon neutral is 2070, for energy independence 2047. So we require 80 gigawatt of electrolyzers by 2030, and we require 500 gigawatt of renewables by 2030. So it's a big target, big achievement. We at John Cockrell are ready, and I believe ecosystem is available. We need a push, and as Prabhat said, that the first step, the economics, those are not the actual problem. The actual problem is the scalability. So I agree with him. We need a push from government, mandatory obligations to develop to make it more optimized, and we are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaideep. And last but certainly not least, Pierre?
And thank you again for this conference. And so, basically, as was mentioned, we have huge challenges to meet by 2030. It's a very short time, and I do believe, as a conclusion, that cooperation between like French stakeholders and Indian stakeholders are really a key element to bring this global hydrogen economy happen faster and way stronger than if we don't do it. And so I'm really glad to be able to see those exchanges and see this cooperation ongoing between all those players. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I cannot do better than this. As a panel, you have certainly exceeded my expectations. And thanks also to our fantastic audience who have just kept the questions coming. And if you just see the chat that we've engaged in, the discussion itself is of the same order as the panel itself. So thank you very much for your intervention, for your time, and for your erudition on this subject. I look forward to following up with all of you. You have our contact numbers over here, and this session will be posted on the Chamber of Commerce website, which we will supply to all of you on LinkedIn. So thank you very much all. And with that, I wish you all a very good day. See you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.